everybody, and welcome to the Wholesmithsel channel. And today's little logging episode, it's going to take place in the shop here today, but the main focus of today's topic is bar compatibility. Many of you know that bars won't interchange from one brand to another, and I'll bring the camera around here in a minute and show you why. So the question is, can I put a Husky bar on a Stihl saw? And the answer is not without modification. And how about a Stihl bar on a Husky? And the short answer is yes, you can. However, there is a caveat to that. So you'd have to either make a spacer or figure out a way to shim the bar in such a way to where it's centered because of the way the studs are made. So anyway, let me bring the camera around here and show you guys what I'm talking about, and go from there, because we're going to get into modifying a Husky bar to fit a Stihl. So one of the reasons that a Husky bar won't fit onto a Stihl is you have flanged studs here. This flange it's got a multitude of purposes. One is to prevent the bar stud from going into the oil tank when it breaks off or it's stripped out and it has to be replaced. The other is it gives a better guide to the bar itself. Now, the diameter of this flange is 12 millimeters, and it's a skosh shy of the thickness of the bar. As you can see here, there's no stud here, but what there is a little bit of a shoulder to where this is like an 8 or 8.5 millimeter thick, because these are M8 threads. And same thing on the Stihl. This is also an M8 thread, but yeah, you get a little bit of kind of a guide effect similar to the Stihl. So looking at the Stihl bar here, you have a slot that is 12.5 millimeters, roughly half an inch, in comparison to 12 millimeters on the stud. So that gives you, some play so that the bar can move like this for your chain adjustment. Now on the Husky bar, you have a 9 millimeter slot and you have an 8 millimeter stud, and there is no flange on the stud. So another problem that you have is the side covers. Now this is a Stihl, and this is not the original side cover. This is off of probably a 44. When I look at the numbers on here, excuse me, this is an 1125, and the saw, this is an 066, and so everything is on here is 1122. So that tells me this came off of a different saw. It still fits, but and it works, but it's not the original. So anyway, you have the placement of where the nuts go is a little bit more centered to where you can use these the original Stihl nuts. Now the original Stihl nuts are an M19 or a 19 millimeter or a 3/4 inch, and that's to get more pressure on the cover itself without cracking it. And you can use your bar wrench, the spark plug socket, in order to tighten it down. Whereas the Husky has this flanged nut, which is a 13 millimeter or half inch size. Oops. And the flange on the nut is also designed to apply a little bit more pressure to the cover, and keep it from cracking. Now, if you go and buy one of these saws, I recommend to go ahead and stick a washer under it, for the simple fact you're going to eventually wear into the case or into the cover like these have been worn into. So it's probably not a bad idea to throw a washer underneath the nut. So anyway, when you lay the bars on top of one another, you'll see that the tails here are fairly identical. The hole placement for the chain tensioner is roughly the same placement. The curvature of the bars is fairly similar. When you pull them up together, you'll see they almost overlap. So it wouldn't be any big deal really to widen the slot on this. Now I'm going to go ahead and widen this on the Bridgeport. I don't recommend doing it by hand because, you know, just accuracy problems that arise. But if you do it by hand, I'd say use a burr on a die grinder as opposed to a disc grinder. Just, you know, so you can kind of keep that slot going in the same direction. So, I mean, I got the Bridgeport, might as well use it. So that's what we're going to do here today is widen this slot out to 12.5 millimeters so that this bar can fit on a Stihl. Now, so one of the critical aspects here is getting the slot on the bar here, or getting the bar lined up on the machine to where you get a nice parallel slot. So we're going to start off here with this. It's not a 1-2-3 block or 2-4-6, but you can use whatever you got. This is a block I made here a while back just for mounting stuff on. And so we're going to use this square here against the table of the machine, slide it up here, and then tighten it up. So now we're going to take our straight edge here and clamp this up against there. And let me bring the camera around here so you can see this a little better. So now I got this C-clamp on here. Reason I got these pads underneath here is if you put undue pressure on your straight edge, you're going to bend it, essentially, unless you get the jaws of it, you know, perfectly flat and square and yada, 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 yada. A machinist's clamp would be better in this situation, but I don't have one that opens up this wide, so I just had to use what I have. And decided to use this with the soft pads. That way I don't get any banana shape to my straight edge here. It maintains it. And I didn't put a whole lot of gronk on it either, just to make sure that it doesn't get warped. So let's adjust this. So what we're going to do is pull this over until you get a nice gap. We're going to use a feeler gauge here to check front and back and make sure that we've got a nice even spacing all along. This bar does have a little bit of a deformation here from manufacturing, where it. So we're going to stick that over there, and of course we're going to have to adjust the tail end of it here. Let me get on the other side. Trying not to get in the view of the camera here too much. So I've got a feeler gauge here of 0.1 millimeter. And we want it barely touching, and we're close, but no cigar. That might have done it. You don't have to give these a whole lot of gronk. Okay, we're going in. And there we go. So something else you got to watch out for, because when you're clamping the bar down to the table, one, I got a soft or a piece of wood underneath it, piece of plywood that's fairly thick. This is hardwood plywood, so it's not going to give, but you're going to have to make sure that the toe is beyond the slot here in the front. When you're looking at the bar, you got the groove that the chain runs in. I realize I'm getting a little bit out of frame here, but anyway, you got to make sure you get beyond that slot. So you have to raise the heel up a little bit, so on the toe end of the clamp, when you're putting pressure on it, it doesn't pinch the slot of the bar. So here we have a HSS bit, 4-flute spiral, and we can work this steel as is. This is a hardened machine or tool steel, but it's not so hard that you can't work it with a file. So anything you can work with a file, because you have to be able to take the burr off, the bar whenever one develops. And so you can use an HSS cutter on this. So we're going to take a look and see how we are for center. And it's looking pretty good. So let's put the bar onto the saw and see how it fits. And lo and behold, works just fine. Now, this is an older saw, so the chain tensioner's on the inboard side of the saw. In the newer ones, it's in the cover. And so we're going to have to use a screwdriver to run the chain tensioner back and forth. Okay, color me a doofus here. Now, Stihl has had a whole slew of different designs that they use that they put into their tensioners. This one is right here on the center where the screw is. I was looking for it down over here and couldn't find it, trying to put on the chain, and of course it's just not there. So here we have the sprocket. Now, as you can see, this is an 8-tooth sprocket, and it has holes out here on one side and it's solid on the other. Now, the way you want to place these on the clutch is with the holes facing out. As you can see, there's a bunch of gunk built up on the clutch here, and that's from the chips building up and then pushing away. And so what happens is you get a buildup of chips, and it can cause the chain to jump off the bar if it gets a little too crazy in there. Usually it won't, but I've seen it where the guides going into the bar have been, you know, excessively worn. The whole thing is designed to have some degree of play, but it's better to run your sprocket like this, because then your cover washer here, once you put the E-clip back on, now the chips can be ejected out and evacuate and keep the whole thing centered. This floats a little bit on the clutch, and so it prevents the chain from pulling to one side or the other, and it centers it on the bar. And so I ran the chain tensioner back, and with this model of Stihl, this is an old one. The even older ones have the screw on the front, and so you got to look for it. The newer ones all have it in the side cover, so it's a lot easier to access. Okay, remote, you can get out of the way here. There we go. So now we'll stick our old 44 cover on here. Now with Stihl, a lot of these parts interchange quite freely. This is a side cover off an old 44, and it'll fit on this 66. It's not supposed to, but it does. You can tell by the casting number. So, with that on there just kind of hand tight, we're going to go ahead and tension the chain up. Now you want to bring your chain in just to where, when you give it a little tug, that it snaps back and rests along the bottom rail of the bar. You want to rest the bar on a piece of wood or something, so that you have a little bit of a downward tension or upward tension on the bar. And so that's a little too tight. Back it off a little bit and then check it again. That looks pretty good. This is about the way you want to keep it tight. You don't want to tighten it too much, because then you're taxing the engine and the clutch and everything too hard, and the whole system breaks down, and it doesn't want to work right. Then you're overheating your bar, your tip, your clutch. I've seen guys, well, keeps the chain from flipping off. No, it doesn't. I've seen guys with their chain on so tight, when they're in hemlock, it just whips that chain right off the bar, and it doesn't matter how tight they had it. You don't want to put too much gronk on these. I mean, you got to put some on it, but you don't want to, I've seen guys put so much torque on these that you got to take a breaker bar almost and break them loose, and then of course the threads on the studs and in the nuts strip out. So there we have now our Husky bar adapted to a Stihl. Now, for putting a Stihl bar onto a Husky, there is a commercially available product, and it looks kind of like an S hook, where you just you put the S on the studs of the saw. And then, well, everybody, that wraps up today's little episode in the logging series. I hope you guys were able to glean a little useful information out of today's presentation. If you have any thoughts, comments, critiques, questions, by all means put them in the comment section below. I'm always glad to clarify things for folks. Now, the one question that's probably going to guarantee to be coming up is, will the oil holes fit? And the short answer is yes. They're pretty much in the same spot on any chainsaw bar in relation to, because the chain has to float by, and it's usually towards the bottom of the groove, and there's usually some relief for the hole where the oil can migrate up or down, you know, depending on, you know, if it's centered on the groove or not. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, and so there's some manufacturer built-in variance there that allows for that oil migration, and so that your chain can get oil. Now, another question is that comes up often that I do hear, should I grease my tip? And the short answer is no. You can, but you're going to be greasing it at least once an hour every time you gas up, or you know, quite often, because the oil from the chain is sufficient enough to lubricate the bearings in the tip of the saw. Now, some saws don't have, or some bars don't have sprocket tips, and those are hard nose bars, and those are for like applications for, like, you know, in the deep south where there's a lot of sand you know, present, and so it just wears the sprocket tips out, you know, way fast. And so that way, with the hard nose bar, there's no moving parts to wear out, and so that's why they have them down there. And with those, you have to run the chain rather loose. So anyway, that's a wrap for today's presentation, and hope to see you guys again soon in the next video.